Welcome to part 5 of the Roman Empire. Now we're going to take a look at the crumbling republic. The Roman Republic's success in conquering the Mediterranean ultimately is going to lead to its own demise. We're going to see this with the murder of the Gracchi brothers by the Senate, the social war, which is going to be a problem, expose the problems on the Italian peninsula itself, and the actions of two military men, Pompey the Great and Julius Caesar, right? And so by the end of that, the Republic itself will be gone. This time period, 133 BCE to about 31 BCE, when this all happened, often referred as the late Roman Republic, is also one of the most or best documented eras in Roman history, right? But it's during this time that various tensions are going to come to a boiling point. And it begins with these two brothers, grandsons of Scipio Africanus, right? The Gracchi brothers, Tiberius Gracchus and Gaius Gracchus. Okay, both of these grandsons of Scipio had become worried about these tensions building up in Roman society, by this cycle of war and the things that we've already talked about, right? Now, the elder Tiberius Gracchus is going to be elected to the tribune in 133 BCE. Right? Remember, he's a grandson of Scipio Africanus, so he already has quite a bit of dignitas because of his family name. Okay. Now, supposedly he was inspired by seeing all of these deposed farmers, veterans living in the city, and these big estates being worked by foreign slaves, and felt that no, something needs to be done about this, right? So he took advantage, since he's elected to the tribune of the plebes. If you remember, he has the right to introduce new law, propose new laws. That's one of the powers of the tribune. So as a member of the tribune, he proposed a new law. He put forth a law that to direct vote, right? He didn't run it by the Roman Senate before putting it out there either. This new law would limit the amount of land people could own. So one person could only own X amount of land, and anybody that owned more than that, that land would be turned over to the government that would then be distributed to poor Roman citizens. Okay, now needless to say, the Roman Senate had all the large landowners, and they became absolutely enraged by this proposed new law. So enraged, in fact, that they literally broke up their benches that they were sitting on at the assembly to turn into clubs, and they literally beat Tiberius to death, along with 300 of his followers, with their broken up benches of the Senate, right? Now, though this is shocking, it's kind of a sign of things to come in Roman politics, right, as we move forward here. Now, 10 years later, in 123 BCE, the younger brother, Gaius Gracchus, is going to take up where his older brother had left off, right? After Tiberius was murdered, of course, his proposed law disappeared, and the Senate got to watch everything return back to the status quo. Gaius in 123 BCE is going to be elected to the tribune, and he's going to put forward Tiberius's original law with some additional things added to it. Right? It's going to have that same limitation on land ownership, but it's also going to create a state-supplied subsidized grain program to make sure everybody has food in the city. It also granted all Latin allies in the Italian peninsula full Roman citizenship, and it called for the building of more roads that would help rural farmers. Now, again, the Senate was absolutely outraged by this, but they didn't dare do like they had with Tiberius. It would look really bad if they broke their benches up and again beat another Gracchus brother to death, another grandson of Scipio Africanus, right? They got a lot of bad PR from doing that last time, as you could probably imagine. Okay, so instead they put out just a little rumor, right? They let it be known that if anyone assassinated Gaius Gracchus, that the Senate would be willing to give that person the weight of Gaius's head in gold. Well, sure enough, not too long after that rumor began to circulate, Gaius was assassinated. The assassin killed Gaius, chopped off his head, and in order to maximize his profit, he drilled a hole and drained the brain out of his head and filled that cavity with lead so that he could get the maximum amount of gold. Now, apparently, this little piece of ingenuity garnered him 17 pounds of gold for Gaius Gracchus's head. Okay. But you can see the instability already as this is going to cause even more unrest and more destabilization here in the Roman Republic. So this political instability is ultimately going to lead to some of these fringe groups beginning to rise up, right? And the first of these are going to be the Italian allies, right? The Socii there on the Italian peninsula itself. Now remember, they had fought the Roman wars, they had stayed loyal even when Hannibal had invaded, and so they felt considerably justified in that they believed that they deserved full Roman citizenship, right? So in 91 BCE, a confederation of Socii revolted, right? The result of this was called the Social War, right? The Social War was a particularly brutal and bitter war since both sides were fighting each other using the same tactics, the same strategies, the same equipment. This was, in essence, a civil war, right? For the next 3 years, beginning in 91 BCE, for 3 years, this war fought with tremendous amounts of bloodshed until finally Rome had pounded the Socii into submission. They'd resubdued them. In the peace treaty that was signed in the aftermath of the social war, though, the Romans were compelled to bestow full citizenship on all of its allies, which is what they were asking for in the first place. So the social war is really a tragic example of how Roman conservatism uh, um, had caused them to fight a war, which though they won, they had given the Allies what they had wanted. So it was completely unnecessary and a completely wasteful a conflict, right? This time period also is a time of massive slave revolts, right, where slaves will rise up against their Roman masters. The most famous of these, of course, was a Thracian gladiator by the name of Spartacus, right? Now, again, eventually all of these slave revolts were suppressed as well, but not without considerable bloodshed and considerable cruelty. For example, in the aftermath of the Spartacus uprising, 6,000 of his followers ended up being crucified and made as effectively as signposts all the way up and down the Appian Way, right? Now, the Roman Republic at this point, for its last 50 years, is really just going to be tottering from one crisis to the next, like these, until finally the right set of circumstances begin to just cause the entire thing to topple over altogether. So one of the men involved in this final downfall of the Republic is Pompey, or also known as Pompey the Great, right? Now, Pompey was the son of a very famous and wealthy general. He was a very ambitious young man, and when the Social War broke out, he was very excited about it, but he was actually too young to hold an elected office at this time or command any Roman military units. So he couldn't bear to be left out of this war. So what did he do? He used his family's own money to raise a private army of 3 Roman legions, and he used those legions to begin engaging in the social war, right, against the Socii. He turned out to be a very skilled commander. He also turned out to be a very bloodthirsty commander. He's very ruthless on the battlefield. Matter of fact, he got a nickname on the battlefield, Carnifex Adolescens, or Young Butcher. Okay. So after some further military adventures that were all successful, he arranged to have his own triumph. A triumph was something that was held to successful, virtuous, and victorious Roman generals, right? If you were very successful on the field of battle, you'd be given a triumph. He arranges his own triumph. Now, his plan was to ride on the Rome on a large chariot pulled by 4 elephants, but those 4 elephants proved to be too big to fit through the gates of Rome, which was kind of symbolic of Pompey's ambition compared to the Roman Republic itself. His ambition was just too big to fit within the framework of this Republican form of government. Right? After this, he continued to scheme to be given additional military commands, which he was. He won further victories there in the Social War, and he returned to Rome again and celebrated yet another triumph. And so by the time he was 35 years of age, he had already celebrated 2 triumphs as a military commander, right? And had built a lot of dignitas. Now, he never held any political office, and Pompey was never a member of the Senate, but despite all this, he let it be known that he wanted to be elected to the consulship. He wanted to become a consul of Rome, despite the fact that at 35, he was actually too young to hold that position. But again, he got his way. Now, one of the duties of the consul was to preside over meetings of the Senate, right? Which he embarrassingly had no clue how to do. He didn't know the protocol. He was ignorant of the process. It was so bad, in fact, that members of the Senate quickly wrote up a pamphlet, kind of a how to run a meeting thing, and gave it to Pompey. Now, at the time of Pompey's consulship, pirates had infested much of the Mediterranean Sea, so Pompey had arranged for a tribune who he had bribed, right, which just was common of members of the consulship or members of the Senate to bribe members of the tribune of the plebes in order to get laws proposed. And this tribune proposed a law that would give Pompey unprecedented powers to suppress the pirates. What Pompey is going to get is a huge sum of money, 500 ships, and an army of 120,000 soldiers, right? And authority to conduct war on all the waters and the coasts of the Mediterranean. Okay, again, this went against most standard appointment protocols and procedures, and it also broke an earlier precedent of dividing the Roman military in such a fashion that no one commander gets control of too many troops, right? Because that would be a danger to the Republican government itself. Okay, but Pompey took this command, and he proved again a talented commander. He wiped all the pirates out. Okay, so Pompey begins to continue to scheme. This time he manipulates some legislative loopholes to be given command of an entire army, which he turns east to deal with a troublesome eastern king by the name of Mithridates. The army he's given, he's basically told this: you are allowed to command this large military force until such time as Mithridates is killed, right? So he takes this army east. He confronts Mithridates. He defeats Mithridates' army, but he allows Mithridates, the king himself, to escape and flee into Central Asia. Now, Mithridates is no longer a threat. His kingdom has been subjugated and turned into a Roman province. But Pompey does nothing to pursue the king himself. Because think about it. If he captures or kills the king, he will lose control of that army. The mandate will be over. So he doesn't do that. He begins heading eastward and conquering more areas, much in the mode of Alexander the Great, of whom he was a great admirer of. He began working his way towards Egypt with this large army when finally he got some bad news. Mithridates had apparently keeled over dead of old age. So at this time now his command was over, and thus too ended his conquests, right? In which actually at a time, he could have just turned around and gone ahead and dismantled the Republic altogether. He did at least follow the tradition. He disbanded his army and went into a semi-retirement. He was just going to exercise power from behind the scenes, right? But one thing he did do in the process of doing all this is he undermined almost every Republican institution. And in doing so, he set a series of precedents that literally could not be undone. Right, which meant those who followed him and kind of followed in his footsteps are going to take this to the next level that's going to finally complete the dismantling of the Republic.